creation of life. I mean, it is a fairy tale, and yet 62% of Americans, many who believe it and many who just are open-minded, want creationism taught in school alongside evolution, and something like 44% want evolution no longer taught. So we are dealing with a society which is, has more power and responsibility, arguably, than any society in human history, where religious fiction and religious literature is really constraining people's view of the world, and it is dictating the kinds of medical research that is done or not done. In the case of stem cell research, it is dictating very likely the kinds of wars we fight or not fight.
But in reading your books, I've been getting the impression that you think the phrase religious fiction is almost an oxymoron, that anything to do with religion is by definition a fairy tale. Is that, am I reading you wrongly, or is that pretty much the way you think?
Well, there's something at the core of the religious experience that I think is very interesting and worth understanding and worth exploring. I just think that you don't have to believe anything on insufficient evidence in order to have what religious people want. For instance, religious people are very concerned that they have their moral behavior and their moral outlook well-grounded, which is to say that they want to be able to say that the Nazis were really wrong in their view of the world. It's not just a matter of opinion. It's, cultural relativism or moral relativism is not the ground truth. There are really right and wrong answers to questions of good and evil.
Yes.
I believe that to be true. I mean, the moment you see that morality is a question of human and animal suffering, then you'll see that there are right and wrong answers to how human beings can be made happy or not happy. And you see that something like honor killing, which goes on in the Muslim world, is not a good strategy to raise happy girls or to create a happy society. And so honor killing is really wrong, I think, in some deep sense when you're actually concerned about human happiness. So it's purely a myth that you need to believe that one of your books was written by the creator of the universe in order to have a firm basis for morality. But I don't think the religious concern about morality is misplaced. Morality is incredibly important, and so too with something like spiritual experience. I think there really is a domain of experience that is spiritual or mystical, for lack of better words, and it's the kind of experience that people have when a monk goes into a cave for a year and meditates or prays to Jesus. There's no question that it is possible for that person to radically transform his moment-to-moment experience of the world, and very likely for the better. What I'm arguing is that you don't need to believe anything preposterous to do that. You can do that very much in the spirit of science. And when you come out of that cave, you should talk rationally about what you can conclude from that experience, and not plunge into divisive metaphysics that really is unjustified, and is unjustified no matter what you experienced in your cave.
So if the monk in the cave believes he has touched the divine in some sense, however he might define that, if he has been in touch with something larger than himself, beyond himself, he's deluded?
Well, no, there's no question that people can have experiences of losing their sense of separateness with the rest of the universe. I mean, we have, in neurological terms, we are a system which is representing the world of our sensory perception and conception, and we are also a system that is representing ourself in the world. Now, it is quite possible to cease to represent yourself in the world, neurologically speaking, and therefore to cease to have a sense of your separateness from the world of your experience. And this is a classically mystical experience which is being studied now in neuroscience laboratories with various techniques of functional neuroimaging. There's no question that this experience is worth having, can be had, and can be understood at some level. And who knows what it means about the structure of the universe in general. What I'm simply saying, though, is that the fact that Christians can have this experience and Buddhists and Hindus can have this experience without ever thinking about Jesus proves rather conclusively that this experience is not corroborating the specific tenets of Christianity. I mean, the best interpretation, if you're a Christian praying to Jesus and you have this incredible experience of rapture and self-transcendence, the best interpretation of that data is not that Jesus is the Son of God, because you need only look to your left and right and you'll see Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims having the same experience. So there's a deeper principle here, principles about human attention and the propensities of human consciousness, which have nothing to do with these cultural artifacts, which we call our religions.
But I guess what I'm getting at is, does it all come down to brain science for you, or does the fact that the Hindu, the Buddhist, and the Christian are having similar experiences mean they are, that it doesn't necessarily mean that Jesus is the Son of God, but it means that there is a creator, that there's a force, that there's something instead of nothing? Or is it reducible to brain science, in your view?
Well, I don't know. This comes down to what you think the relationship between consciousness and the physical world is, and we clearly just don't know. I mean, we know that the relationship between mind, our various mental faculties, and the physical brain is rather direct, which is to say that if you damage certain regions of your brain, you will lose certain mental faculties. I mean, you'll lose the ability to understand English, for instance. And so the idea that a totally damaged brain at death is something which a human soul kind of lifts off of and floats away into some other circumstance, mental abilities. I mean, you can float off your damaged brain and you will still speak English and recognize human faces and recognize your grandmother in that tunnel of light. That seems rather naive. But if you're asking about whether there's an interior dimension a subjectivity that transcends death, nobody knows, because nobody knows just what the status of consciousness is relative to matter. Nobody knows whether a single neuron is conscious or not, and nobody knows whether an electron has something that is like to be an electron, an interior dimension. We would expect the universe to appear exactly the way it does now, if that were true. And it may be that there's just no experiment that would tease out the difference between a world in which consciousness emerges purely out of physical complexity, or a world in which consciousness is somehow running all the way down into the fabric of reality. But I think the important thing to concede is that we do not know, and to put in place of this ignorance a false certainty about paradise and invisible deities, and who dole out good fortune or not, and who care what name they are called. This step toward intellectual honesty will really be good for us, and we're not encouraging it.
In telling the story of the people in New Orleans who prayed to be rescued during Hurricane Katrina as the waters rose all around them, you say to your readers, do you have the courage to admit the obvious? These poor people died talking to an imaginary friend. That's brutal. That's awfully harsh, don't you think?
What I think is brutal is the status quo. I think what is terrifying and really such an agent of suffering in this world is that we don't teach people how to grieve because we don't think it's possible. We teach people that in the place of grief, we teach them we encourage this fantasy life, that death is not a problem, that death doesn't exist, that you get everything you want after you die, that there's an omniscient travel agent looking out for you. And we then encourage people not to notice all of the desolating evil that is going on in the world, which this travel agent should be preventing. I mean, we talk about every person who survived Hurricane Katrina came out of that experience claiming that God had saved them. I mean, that is just the most common response of religious people in times of emergency. If they're not dead, they were saved by God. Well, God didn't save all the other people. I mean, the infants who got drowned in their cribs, and the old people who had to seek refuge in their attics and were drowned there. I mean, these people were good people. That they died through no fault of their own. And the problem with religious mythology is that it dampens our compassion. It diminishes the reason to be compassionate for other people, because you have some sense that this is all part of God's plan and this is not an accident and maybe those people deserved what they got. No, there are people who are just fantastically unlucky, and